Welcome this week in Missouri Politics, the last week before spring break. Big news happening, but no bigger news than around the charter school issue. We are joined by Robbyn Wahby, the executive director of the Missouri Charter School Commission. Is that correct?
That's right.
So break down what, I just want to start from the beginning, not even what you do. Everybody's heard the word charter schools.
Sure.
What actually is a charter school?
Well, I think the first thing I can tell you is it's a public school.
Okay.
So charter schools are public schools. They're free and they're open for all. As a matter of fact, the only way that you can get into a charter school is through a lottery. So it's a very fair way to access charter schools.
So no Aunt Becky moves here. You have to actually get through a lottery. It's all in the up and up, right?
Well, actually, the other, unfortunately, there's a lot of rigging that goes on in the K-12 system we can get to if you'd like to talk about it.
Well, you know, as a guy that used to play baseball pretty competitively, I remember we used to accuse some of them of recruiting, but that's topic for another time. If you're, right now, your charter school, nothing's free though, right? Do you get the state money you would get to go to public school and that's transferred to the charter school?
Yeah, they are public schools in all ways.
Okay.
They have to follow all of the federal and state and local laws that pertain to public schools. Mm-hmm. The difference is they operate outside of a bureaucracy. They're independent. And for that autonomy, they actually trade higher accountability. If they're not performing, they're closed. So there's no persistently failing charter schools.
Sometimes in government you hear they will be closed. Have there been charter schools that have closed for not performing?
Actually, 30% of the charter schools that have opened in the state of Missouri have closed.
If you're going to take an entrepreneurial spirit to something, we don't like to talk about it, but part of capitalism, part of competition is you fail.
Absolutely. Part of innovation is. Yeah. I don't think that the light bulb was invented the first time.
Let me walk through, in folks watching this all over the state of Missouri, who could actually attend a charter school today?
Right now, the only two locations where we're allowed to have charter schools are in St. Louis and in St. Louis Public School District and the Kansas City Public School District. Now, if you're an unaccredited district or provisionally accredited district, a charter school can open under certain conditions.
Now, folks in St. Louis, I know they think all these towns, and there are these wonderful communities in St. Louis. To the rest of us in the state, St. Louis is everything from like St. Charles to Arnold. We're at in St. Louis, but by the natural definition of St. Louis, can you have a charter school?
Right, not the Cardinal Baseball St. Louis, right? Where everybody's
That would be the
fan.
7-state area of KMOX, but yes.
Right. So right now we're only talking in the school district. That is just the city of St. Louis. So there are 25 other districts surrounding the St. Louis public schools that cannot access a charter school.
So I've heard, even from supporters of charter schools, that there could be more done on the regulation end. This is an innovative thing. It's like when they first passed the first law on Uber, to let Uber be in Missouri. You have to come back and see that innovation, see how the law actually is in practice, and they've adjusted some provisions of it. In charter schools, is there room for a better regulation? Because you do hear public school advocates, and even I think some people that are for expanding charter schools say we could regulate charter schools a little differently, maybe more efficiently. Are you one of those?
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, that's what I am.
Yeah.
I am the regulator of charter schools for the state. That's all we do. Could
you have more power to get on the front end of charter schools that are going to close, or just is there a better way to regulate charter schools to maybe put them in the best possible chance to succeed?
Well, we have a lot of regulations that exist already. I'm not sure that it's as much the regulations that exist as whether the regulator themselves are willing to take the hard stand on this. And I think that really differentiates us from school districts and the higher education community how they go about this work. We all, districts, higher education, and the commission want the very best for children. I'm really confident that everyone's coming from that perspective, but sometimes you have to actually take a hard stand. And these are well-meaning people who operate charter schools, but if they're not doing what's necessary for all the children in their care, we have to take a stand and close them.
To me, this argument's been interesting the whole time. You've seen labor issues become less partisan, frankly. It's pretty well broke down partisan sides, as there's not a lot of partisan crossover, I should say. School reform has been something that's probably the most dividing thing in the Republican caucus right now. You're an expert in these issues. I'm just a simple hillbilly. It does seem like it breaks down. If you're in leadership, you're for this on the Republican side. If you're from the suburbs, you're for this. If you're from rural Missouri, you're not. Break down why this issue would matter. We know if you live on Del Mar, you can go to a charter school. What if you live in Dexter? Why should you care?
Well, as I see it, I think one of the real cornerstones of the Republican agenda and what I've heard from Missourians wherever I go in this state is that it's the family first. And so when we really think about charter schools, what we are actually doing is saying to parents, what you think about your child's needs matters primary. And so in our current way, we have for 150 years organized public education in Missouri was that government decided where your child went to school. What charter schools say is we want parents to be able to make that decision. So I think a parent in Dexter, Missouri knows exactly what's best for their child as much as a parent in St. Louis, Missouri. And we want to give them an option if they want something different. Look, every child has unique needs. And if we as a community can find a way to address a group of children who have something special that they need, then we should do that for them. The one size fits all doesn't work in a society as diverse as ours today.
Do you think, though, maybe it's a issue that maybe the school board should be more active in? I mean, until Eric Greitens pulled his Wiley Coyote moment with the DESE board, I don't think people knew who Margie Vandeven was. Those school boards seem to be the folks that are on the front line. Do you think maybe there should be less bureaucracy at Jeff City and more local school board control?
Well, one of the wonderful things about charter schools is they all have school boards too. And so there are 518 school districts.
How do you get on that school board?
They are run as a Missouri nonprofit, and so they have to follow all of the extra rules that are under the nonprofit law in the state of Missouri as well.
Are they like elected by the parents of the people that go to the charter school, or how do they get on that board?
They actually, each of them have separate bylaws, and so there is as local control as you can get.
We've all had that one parent that yells at the ref during the high school basketball game that gets on the school board and raises Cain. Do you see? I mean, is there the chance for that contrarian to get on that board?
Well, I think contrarians should be welcomed because I think we always need the checks and balances.
Well, if it wasn't, I wouldn't get to go many places.
So this is not me and my friends. I don't. This is actually, these are nonprofit organizations that have bylaws that have to do all of the same kind of reporting on academics and finances, and all of their governance is subject to the Missouri Sunshine Law. So they're really very locally run schools.
So at the national level, Donald Trump is a huge supporter of innovating these education programs. Sometimes that it seems to be a federal policy that does not connect within the Republican Party down to the state level. Does that, as an observer of this, surprise you?
It does. I think that there's again, what I think we need to be focused on is how do we make sure that we clean up this misunderstanding about charter schools, that this really is around the parents' right to choose what's best for their child. It really is about promoting local control and the freedoms for individuals who are taxpayers and parents to make the decisions on what's best for their kids.
It's an interesting thing. I've watched probably one of the most talented people that's held that speaker's gavel, Elijah Haar. He's kind of the Donald Trump of Missouri on this issue. He's went out very far. Tell folks about working with Speaker Haar on issues of charter schools. Well,
I think, leadership matters in everything, and nothing speaks louder than leadership in public education as well. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate the speaker putting children first in this state, and he is working tirelessly to make sure that families throughout Missouri have an option, a public option where they live.
Let me break this down. So if you live on Del Mar, you can go to a charter school. If let's say hypothetically your school district was unaccredited, it was struggling, and you're a family that lives on Del Mar in the city of St. Louis, if you couldn't go to a charter school in Missouri, what would your options be?
Well, people with means have always had options, right?
And so private schools.
Private schools would be, or pick up and get a mortgage in a district that you like. But working people who don't have that as extra capital, they're stuck, and they're told by their local government, you take it or leave it. And for too many families, that's just not an option that's in the best interest of their children.
So we've talked about Del Mar. Let's go back to Dexter. If you're a family who likes their school, I had 4 generations of my family go to Neelyville High School in West Butler County. They are afraid of something changing that dynamic. What would you say to them?
Well, I would tell you, look, I have a great auto mechanic, and I would not change my auto mechanic for anything. Why would a new place down the street that opens up by my house attract me when everything I ever wanted is in that auto mechanic shop now, right? So, if I'm that protective about my car, how much more protective am I going to be about my child? So only when families want this option does this happen. This is a supply and demand in the most market-based, in the most simple way you can think of it. We only open charter schools when there's evidence that families want it. They can only operate if they have the resources necessary to do the hiring, and they're only going to have the resources necessary to do the hiring of teachers if there are children who want to go to that school.
Last question, in your opinion, in the realities of where Missouri is, what is the next possible step in charter schools to advance them, either better quality charter schools, expanding them? What will be the rational thing you could actually accomplish in this General Assembly that you think would be a prudent step forward for every kid to have options?
Well, I think that the leadership, unwavering commitment to kids needs to be commended, and I think we need to hold steadfast to that. This is about families. This is about making sure that every kid gets their unique needs met. And so what I think we should do is really make sure that the first step is go where their people are. Let's go where there's large densities of people and give the people an option to be able to see these schools open in their communities. I think that's step one.
Ms. Wahby, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with our opinion maker panel. Wiley Price joins the show.
For more than a century, the St. Louis Carpenters Union has shaped our communities. Through trusted alliances, we deliver skilled professional craftspeople while our business partners provide the kind of quality jobs that keep our economy humming. It's a blueprint that has worked since 1882. Turning Missouri into a right-to-work state stalls progress, wipes out jobs, and kills momentum. Right to work is wrong for everyone. Let's keep Missouri moving forward. Visit carpdc.org to learn more.
Looking to get quality insurance at a price you can afford? Now you can, thanks to CFM Insurance. Select from our broad range of farm, home, and rental property coverage. Find an agent right in your local area, as CFM is represented by a network of 200 independent agencies throughout Missouri. For personal and dependable service from a company with a history of insuring the families of Missouri that dates back to 1869, visit weinsuremissouri.com and find an agent near you today.
All across Missouri, our new car and truck dealers are building strong local economies. When you buy a car or truck in Missouri, you're helping to support over 20,000 Missouri families who rely on the auto industry for good-paying local jobs. You're also helping fund our communities, schools, first responders, and our roads because dealers generate millions of dollars in tax revenue. Missouri's automobile dealers have been the foundation of our communities for generations and for generations to come. The Missouri Automobile Dealers Association, the heart of Missouri.
At Ameren, Missouri, we know what light can do. It draws people together and chases monsters away. And if you shine it in the right direction, it will light the path for the next generation, showing them what their tomorrow could look like and spotlighting the possibilities that lay in front of them. Investing in our community by lighting the way forward. That's energy at work. Ameren, Missouri.
Welcome back. We're going to talk politics now with our opinion maker panel. Representative Dogan, St. Louis County. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
And now I think it's as the first time, friend of the show, but as the executive director of the Missouri Republican Party, Gene Evans.
Yeah.
You get the title right?
Executive Director, yeah.
Good
That's
deal.
right. Great, thank you.
Stephen Roberts, representative from St. Louis City. Welcome back, sir.
Glad to be here.
Wiley Price, good to see you back, sir. What's
How are you?
the lapel pin?
The lapel pin today is the Muni. They're in district. They just had a promotion. A good friend of mine, Kofi Coleman, was just promoted to executive director. So figured I'd pump up the district.
I got my wife to agree to marry me at the Muni. It's a very special place.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very, very cool.
That should be, you should buy your season tickets now. That's the best endorsement for that.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about the issue. I think that we might have led with charge. Now we're going to lead with the Department of Revenue directors resigning. He had a pretty rough go of it. There had been some problems. You know, revenue's never going to be a popular department. No one wants the revenue department to call them.
Absolutely.
It's never good news.
Absolutely.
So it's not the most popular job, but there were some issues.
Yeah, not unless you're FX Daily. Everybody loves that guy
Yeah,
somehow.
that's true.
Yeah, no, it's just that was just a bad look on just politics in general, and specifically the Republican Party. It was just a cover-up on top of a cover-up on top of a cover-up. I mean, they knew that the Trump tax would have a direct effect on Missouri taxpayers, and they would have surprise kickbacks on having to pay the government. And they pretty much slow-rolled that and covered that up to push it off till after the November election.
Are you sure it's fair to say cover-up? And I think it was actually found by Scott Fitzpatrick.
Yes, that's correct. That's correct. I mean, cover-up is the proper word, and that's not me attacking the Republican Party in any way. The facts are facts.
What do you think? I mean, it looks to me like they might not have known the scale of it until much later in the year, but they probably didn't know there was a problem. Scott Fitzpatrick knew there was a problem early, and, you know, sometimes it might be the right time for someone to move on.
I understand that, but I think that, you know, as soon as you find something like that out, you've got to let the Missouri taxpayer know as soon as possible.
And I thought they let some folks know. I mean, it's not like they did send out a press release, they did some things, and I think they've said they could have done more, right?
Yeah, they could have done more, and I got to push back on, you know, blaming Republicans for this. We're the ones who are pointing it out. We have a special committee pointing it out. We have Scott Fitzpatrick. We have a speaker who has been holding this guy accountable. So, yeah, mistakes were made. It was really a matter of when, not if, that he was going to resign. So now he's gone, but I think that we have been holding his feet to the fire, and this is a result we got. And I don't think that, I think Republicans should be applauded for holding this guy accountable.
Well, when I see the word special committee on oversight, when I see blue ribbon, you immediately roll your eyes. However, I mean, is there a hillbilly that has looked as smart as Robert Ross since Jed Clampett struck oil? I mean, Robert Ross is the one that has been even taking some heat from Republicans. He was right, wasn't he?
He was, and I think this was a really bipartisan calling out of Mr. Walters. And like Gene mentioned, Scott Fitzpatrick was on this issue initially. So this was really a bipartisan takedown, if you could call it that, of somebody who wasn't doing a good job and wasn't being really accountable to the people of Missouri. I don't know if he ever actually moved to the state of Missouri. You know, there was just a whole lot of issues with his tenure. So it's good to see that he's leaving, but it's kind of a disturbing time to have it happen right before tax season.
You're one of the most fair legislators I know in either chamber. Crystal Quade came out with a bill to give Missourians a longer period without penalty to pay if they owed more taxes, which could result from this. I saw Republicans pick the issue up, file a similar legislation. She kind of was on this early. Looks pretty good.
Yeah, and she has a habit of kind of taking credit for stuff that Republicans are either doing already. They did that when we had our transparency, where we've opened up our committee hearings to you know, public viewing, with having them being streamlined. And she kind of took credit for that when that was the speaker's doing. He's been working on this for a number of years.
Which makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, it's been something that a lot of people in our caucus have been pushing for years, so I'm glad to see it finally happen.
Look, I thought Crystal Quade was out front on this early with not just the politics. I mean, and she took a victory lap this week, as she should have, but she actually had a policy procedure that she said, hey, if the government screwed this up, the government should give you more time to pay without a penalty. And the Republicans seem to agree because they've taken the same bill and are running it.
Right, and I got to say, Crystal's, you know, one of the hardest working people in the Capitol, so it's always good to see her kind of pushing these things forward.
Well, I seen she took a pretty good victory lap, right? And look, that's the way politics works. But absolutely. I thought the part that made that victory lap look, you know, not just grandstanding, I should say, was she come up with a policy proposal early on that says, hey, the government screwed up, the government should have to cover the mess up.
Yeah, I mean, that's 1 + 1 = 2 in my opinion. And the reason that I say it's on the Republican Party, just kind of kick back to you, is because when I feel like when you're in position of leadership, there's no passing the buck. So I feel like they knew this in time and ample enough time to take care of this prior to the November elections. So that's where I stand with that.
Let's talk about something where 4 + 5 = 9. Title IX has been a big deal. It's been a little funny. I always get a chuckle out of watching the Post and the Star are shocked that people hire so many lobbyists when they have fleets of lobbyists to protect their tax breaks. But there's some lobbyists hired. There was a dark money thing that I'm not sure was a very good look. I think it could have been done different, financed by a St. Louis businessman. I always thought the interesting part was it seems to have gotten much more about the process than the actual policy. Tell us what is actually in the Title IX proposal.
Well, it's a complicated proposal, and it's something, you know, it's like any other piece of legislation. The way it was written initially, it is going to have committee hearings, it's going to get changed through the process. But the entire idea of it is that there's been a series of articles in publications that are not right-wing publications like The Atlantic, detailing how predominantly college males are losing due process rights. Colleges are putting them through these hearings when they're accused of sexual misconduct, and they don't have the right to know what the accusations against them are. They don't have the right to cross-examine people who've accused them of these things or the witnesses, and they don't have a right to legal representation. And there's furthermore a really disturbing racial disparity in the number of African-American men who are put under this, who are subject to it. And it was really just disturbing and disgusting to see Tony Messenger and to see the rest of the media attacking David Stewart over this issue. He is a fine Christian man. I've known him for half my life. And, you know, so full disclosure, he's been a financial supporter of mine and all that.
You know, something I've seen that I've watched you carry a burden of is you're the highest ranking African-American Republican in the state of Missouri, correct?
That's right.
I've watched people bring problems to you that maybe they didn't bring to their own legislator because they felt more comfortable speaking to somebody who could maybe have better empathy and better sympathize with them. I've watched David Stewart being the most successful African-American businessman in the state I know of. Many people will bring problems to him that deal with race because it's just easier to talk to somebody that maybe has a better perspective and understanding. I've thought it's been odd how people have attacked him when, as I understand this, a lot of the Title IX cases, similar to the criminal justice system, if you don't think that African-American males get a rough shake in the criminal justice system, you're not being serious. And the Title IX exacerbates that because of some of the transparency issues. I've been shocked at the attacks he's taken when I think he's trying to solve a legitimate problem, not by a law.
That's right. And it's been ridiculous to see them attacking his motivation. I mean, geez, why would an African-American man over the age of 60 think that there might be problems of men being falsely accused? And I think this is a fairness issue because Mr. Stewart, just like I do, has a son and a daughter. You don't want to make it so that people who do have legitimate issues aren't able to bring those forward. And so you want to have legislation that ensures that both a complainant and someone who's being accused are treated fairly and that they have justice at the end of the day.
Representative, this has been something that's been interesting. I think that it's easy when you talk about these issues to focus on the process or what kind of committee, and I don't think it was a good look to form a committee that wasn't transparent, but I think it's pretty well transparent now that he's the funder of it. I think that maybe people get caught up in the emotion and forget there is an issue here that people can talk about.
Absolutely, and I think something that's kind of been overlooked is the committee process. And when this bill came through, I've got to thank the chairman, Representative David Gregory, the bill sponsor as well, Representative Dorman, who really listened to the concerns of the universities, and we made over 23 substantial changes to the bill. They let me actually put one of my amendments on it as well. So, I mean, that's how the legislative process is supposed to work, and you have a very different committee substitute that we're working with now.
Representative Price, I have been shocked at the people that have come up to me since we spoke about this on the show and talked about experiences women have had in college. I can't even begin to think about how you would discuss this issue if you'd had that happen to you in college, the sensitivity of it. But there is a serious public policy issue past all that, isn't it? I mean, am I right?
I have to agree with you. Look, I think the conversation is long overdue when we're talking about women in any situation, workplace, college. I think it's 1 out of every 4 women have some sort of sexual assault before the age of 18. The statistics are uncomfortable. I have an 8-year-old daughter, so anything that we've been put into place to protect our kids. What I don't like about the original bill was that there was some cross-examining that could happen between the victim and the person that was accused. That made me very uncomfortable. But again, applaudance to the bill handler for going back and making all of those committee subs. So it's a much better bill. There are still some things that I would like to question that I'll be doing my due diligence on. But yeah, I mean, the conversation of women and sexual assault is long overdue in any environment.
I think we have to get away from attacking people for expressing their views or supporting issues. And the personal attacks that we saw on Mr. Stewart are just completely out of line. I mean, there's nothing in his past or his history that has been anything but above board. So maybe you disagree with the tactics, okay? That doesn't mean he's not a good person and he doesn't have serious concerns. So I would like to see the discourse raised to a level where if you can't find fault with the policy, then you can't just attack the person because they wanted to do that. And we need to get to a place where we stop attacking each other. You can disagree. We do it all the time on the House floor. But then afterwards, you say it's not a personal thing. It's not his character. Leave David Stewart alone. He's a great citizen of this area. He does a lot of good things. Like, respect the fact that he wants to deal with this issue and stop attacking him.
It's odd Washington University wanted him on their board, but maybe then they wanted to attack him when they didn't agree with the first point of disagreement. That was a bit odd. Let's talk about something else in the education sphere, and that's charter schools. That was probably the underlying issue people were talking about the last few weeks. It did not come up in the House. You uniquely probably know from that caucus room how tough this is on really an urban-rural divide.
It is, but it is, you know, having more control over education and parental choice is part of the Republican platform. So I would like to see more of our Republican representatives embrace that platform and support this bill.
It's a little weird. I mean, charter schools are only the city of St. Louis and the city of Kansas City, right?
That's right.
The expansion would almost be if they're good for one, they should be good for everyone, right?
Well, it depends. I mean, just like a lot of the
Or
policies,
they shouldn't have them for everyone, right?
Well, right. I feel like in certain communities they may work, some they don't. I mean, I've got some charters in my district that I've toured and visited. Some are performing very well, but I've also got constituents who, have horror stories, like with what happened with Confluence Academy.
So, I mean, you're in that room. It looks to me like if you're in leadership or you're from the suburbs, you're for this. If you're from rural Missouri, you have real questions. How do you bridge that divide? And it is odd that something's only good in places but is outlawed in other places.
I think we really need to get away from the demonization of charter schools. There's a lot of people who think that they're private schools. They're not. They're public schools. Mm-hmm. And if I, as a parent, have a district that's not working for me, the district I grew up in, Normandy, is a perfect example of that. You can't tell me year after year you're going to have this district that's not working.
Wayne Wilcutt,
no options.
Wayne Wilcutt was the guy who was on the Neelyville School Board, kept him close in Hillview. I thought he was great. I would have voted for him 10 times. Do you think you should elect the charter school board members?
That's right. And now they've even limited the bill. We're only talking about expanding it to St. Louis County, and these rural folks are still opposed. I just don't get it.
Representative, it is a complicated issue. I think you can make a serious policy discussion that taking that money out of public schools will harm the public schools.
That's the gripe, is that that they're cutting into the money from public schools while also from the hedge funds on down, they're getting money from other places that the public schools aren't allowed to access. So accountability is always the key word when you're talking about charters. So that's the conversation that everybody's having, whether you're in rural or urban areas.
With a minute left, who won the week?
I would say personally I have to give it to Ron Hicks. I'm in the Criminal Justice Committee. He brought an excellent bill through for expungement with this new marijuana enterprise that we have coming. The bill was in perfection. It's up for third read.
Who won the week?
Rory Rowland. He got, I believe, the first Democratic bill out of the House regarding his passion and work for sheltered workshops.
He has really worked hard on that issue. It's nice to see somebody take a policy issue and really own it.
Absolutely.
Who won the week?
I'm going to say Scott Fitzpatrick. He saved a woman's life on a plane and got to go to the White House and meet with Brett Kavanaugh and some other leaders and at the White House. So good for Scott.
Who won the week?
I'm going to say Floor Leader Rob Vescovo and Speaker Pro Tem John Wieman. They were able to come to an agreement to have Rob run for Speaker. I don't see anybody opposing him. He's going to be excellent, just the way he's been excellent as Floor Leader, and John's going to continue to be our Pro Tem, I believe.
I've got to say somebody else in the House leadership. I'm going to say the Speaker of the House, Elijah Har. No person in modern Missouri politics has had to defeat some of the most sinister, corrupt elements of politics as he had. Stared them all down, defeated them. Some leaders after some of those fights would have been very timid and not been bold. Instead, I think he's been maybe the most boldest speaker we've ever seen. He's passed the most pro-life legislation in the history of the Missouri House, took on issues of taxation to schools, and when you're a bold leader, you don't always strike. But when you're a bold leader, you make big things when you do. I say not only won the last week, but the last 3 months is House Speaker Elijah Har. We'll see you next week. I'll be in Jupiter, Florida. Very special guest. You'll love it. Next week on This Week in Missouri Politics.
This Week in Missouri Politics, sponsored by the Missouri Association of Career Fire Protection Districts, Spire, and Sterling Bank.